Welcome back to the podcast, guys. I'm Kavya, and today's guest is literally a powerhouse. She just graduated from Shiv Nadar School, and honestly, her resume is insane. She's super passionate about macroeconomics and behavioral finance. She even got a certificate of excellence at the World Economics Cup. On top of that, she also got selected and attended the global final round of the Cambridge Economics and Finance competition at the University of Cambridge, United Kingdom. But she doesn't just study all day. She's been an exceptionally talented sports person, literally winning medals and trophies in state and district chess championships and taking home silver in the Delhi SFA Badminton Championship. Oh, and she also just won Best Direction for Theatre in the Ivy League. Please welcome the girl who actually does it all, my friend Khushi.
Hi, Kavya. Thank you for making me a part of this. I'm really excited and looking forward to this. So, in today's episode, we'll be discussing two very interesting topics. Before we turn our attention to college admissions, today we're actually starting with something way more fun. So, today we'll be talking about how the economy of South Korea benefited from the Korean wave and its global influence. From K pop and entertainment to skincare, beauty, and even Korean food, we'll dive into how K culture has made its mark across countries.
Yeah, so today Khushi is going to walk us through this crazy economic strategy that South Korea pulled off. And then later, we are going to get into her university advice, giving you guys the ultimate cheat sheet for applying to the UK and Canadian universities. So grab a snack and let's get into it. Okay. So, Khushi, so you were saying South Korea totally flipped how they make money, right? And it all started with a movie in the 90s. Explain this because it sounds insane.
Honestly, it sounds totally fake sometimes, but it's real. So, back in the 90s, the South Korean government was looking at their economy. They mostly just built stuff like Hyundai cars and Samsung TVs, but then they saw this one crazy stat about the movie Jurassic Park.
Oh, wait. Like the dinosaur movie.
Yeah, like literally that dinosaur movie. They realized that the money Hollywood made just from seeing Jurassic Park all over the world was equal to what Korea made from selling 1.5 million Hyundai cars.
Oh, that's wild. One movie equaled 1.5 million cars.
Right. So the government had this massive light bulb moment. They realized that entertainment is an absolute gold mine. You don't need giant, expensive factories to make a hit song or a movie. So they did a huge pivot. They started pouring money into music and film. They set up training camps for pop stars, funded movies, and basically built the K pop and K drama that we see today.
Yeah, okay. So that makes so much sense because now BTS and Blackpink are like literally everywhere. But how does that actually help their economy? Like besides Spotify streams, how does a song make a country rich?
So basically, it's this thing called soft power. If you get people to love your culture, they automatically want to buy your stuff. It's like an economic cheat code. And like you watch a K drama and see the main character eating a certain food, like the famous coffee candy Kopiko, or using a certain lip gloss, and suddenly you want it too.
Yeah, actually even I literally do that. I bought a lip tint last week just because of a Korean TikToker.
Exactly. That's the best example. I mean, like, you can also consider food as a really great example. Have you seen those Samyang Buldak spicy noodles?
The ones in the black and red packs. Yes, they just hurt to eat, but they're so good.
They're everywhere now. It started with something as simple as a spicy noodle challenge on YouTube, but with Korean culture becoming so popular globally, the demand just exploded. In fact, South Korea's content exports have now surpassed $13.3 billion, while K pop album sales have reached around 1.24 trillion won in 2023. And it doesn't just stop there. Korean food has also become a global trend. Samyang saw its ramen sales jump by 158% in the US and 33% in China, with global interest even being linked to K pop stars like BTS. The government has also recognized this potential and they've provided around 1 trillion won, or you could say $763.7 million, to support the content industry. And the impact, it goes beyond exports. South Korea welcomed 11.3 million international tourists, while Korean became the sixth most popular language to study in 2025. So, what started as entertainment has grown into something much bigger, a cultural phenomenon that is influencing what people watch, eat, buy, and even learn.
That's so smart. They literally turned being cool into a billion-dollar business, right?
Yeah, exactly. So instead of relying only on selling cars and electronics to grow their economy, they decided to expand their approach. They started focusing on their soft power, which just means using their everyday culture like music, TV shows, and food to connect with people and build a strong, positive influence all over the world. By sharing their entertainment and culture with the world, they created tons of new jobs and massively boosted their exports and international trade. This whole strategy really exploded during the pandemic. When everyone was stuck at home during the lockdowns, people started exploring new shows, music, and food online, which basically led to a huge spike in the global demand for Korean products that is still going strong today.
Right. Anyway, so speaking of making smart moves, I mean, obviously, this was an amazing discussion. So I think it's time that we move to something more intellectual, like talking about uni apps. So, Khushi, you applied to both the UK and Canada, right? So
Yeah.
you basically know the whole system inside out. So I want to rapid fire some questions at you for everyone stressing right now who's going to be applying this coming year. So, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Okay. So, first off, UCAS only lets you apply to 5 UK universities. So, how do you select them?
So, firstly, it's actually very important to do your research about which university you want to apply to and their courses. So, the first step is to actually do your research, and then the five universities are selected on the basis of one is your dream choice, the other two are your achievables, where you think you'll be easily getting into, and then the other two are your safety choices, which are basically your backup plans. So, yeah.
That's actually really smart. So, it's better to apply for the exact same degree across all 5 UK choices, or can you like mix the courses?
Yes, you can, but since UCAS only allows you to put one personal statement, it's preferred to select courses which are similar. For example, I myself combined economics with politics or finance for different universities, and these are very different fields, but ultimately I linked them all together with the main focus being economics. And after doing that, I ensured that my SOP remains focused and coherent. So you can also apply to different courses in the same university. That is also a possibility. However, that gets counted as one of the five choices. So you are left with one choice less. For example, taking two courses from the same university would be counted as two choices on your UCAS, which will ultimately leave you with three more choices.
Right. That's quite a good explanation on this. So, speaking of the essay, what makes the UK personal statement so different from essays for other countries?
There are actually only three questions provided in the UK for the UK personal statement, and they change on UCAS every year. So these have to be answered within a character limit, which will also be provided at the time of application when they open on UCAS. So due to this short limit, you have to be very precise and straight to the point. So basically, try to avoid beating around the bush. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I think it's like a 4,000 character limit if I'm not wrong. Uh,
yeah, that's
yeah. But since you write just one essay for all 5 UK schools, how do you make it work for different universities?
So basically, the universities in general are going to look for how interested and passionate you are for the course you select, and what all things you have done related to that field and the skills you gained in those journeys. So, which actually make you fit for that particular course. So, this is something which is common for all. However, it's good to look into what different universities want in their students. So, you can include those specific points as well. But generally, it is quite similar.
Okay, got it. So now let's talk about Canada. So how different is the UK personal essay compared to the Canadian applications?
So for Canada, I applied to universities across Toronto, Ontario, and Vancouver. The application process varies depending on each university. Some institutions use a common portal like OUAC, while others, such as UBC, have their own application systems. As a result, the essay requirements and formats differ from university to university. Although the structure of the essays changes, the core content remains the same mostly. So, one key difference that I noticed compared to UK applications is that Canadian applications allow you to be more descriptive about your achievements and your journey. And the UK application process also allows you to discuss your experiences, but the approach here is more focused and specific, and the emphasis is often on connecting your academic interests, skills, and experiences directly to your chosen course.
Okay. So does Canada really just care about your grades, or do extracurriculars actually matter as well?
They both are equally important, I would say. But Canada doesn't just look at your grades. If you have a strong extracurricular profile, that matters a lot. But for UK, academic grades are very important.
Okay. So now let's get on to mental health. What is your best advice for students who are stressing over getting high predicted grades?
I would say that it is not something to worry about if you've been consistently doing well in your academics. What matters is the score you will ultimately achieve to meet your university's conditions. So it's always better to focus on the long term goal, which can be achieved through smaller, consistent steps.
For real. And on that note, how do you bounce back mentally when an exam simply doesn't go your way? Because this is something that's very common among a lot of students.
Yeah, true. That has happened with me like so many times. I would recommend doing something you like because it helps you get over something like that very easily. Like it can be anything, like dancing, cooking, painting, listening to music, like anything. Because like for me, like I enjoy listening to music to relieve myself of stress, to quickly move on from the stress of the exam and actually motivate myself to make the next step better.
Yeah, okay. So when's the best time to start applying to backup countries so you aren't scrambling later on?
It depends on each university's deadlines, but it's always better to plan everything beforehand and not wait until the last minute so that it gets done in one go.
Okay. So now last question. Looking back, what is the single smartest thing you did to protect your university plans?
So I also actually applied to countries whose requirements weren't that difficult to meet for me, and I think that is that is something one must do, because you should always have like a backup plan ready whatsoever, and the future is really unpredictable. So that's one thing that you should always be prepared with a plan B.
That's honestly such a good mindset to have. Kushi, thank you so much for being here and doing this with me.
Thank you for having me, and yeah, this was really fun.
Yeah. And to everyone listening, get some sleep, apply to your backups early, and maybe go eat some spicy ramen. See you next week.